Greetings, Crestkill community. Dr. Peter Hughes here, your superintendent, and tonight we're going to be discussing the Crestkill K through 12 health education standards. Mr. Roth and I will be making this short video to give you an overview of your grade level's curriculum, as well as some things that you need to be made aware of. The purpose of this presentation is really threefold. It's to give you accurate information regarding the new updated New Jersey Student Learning Standards, to provide an overview of the grade level curriculum, and finally to help you decide if you would like to have your child opt out of any of the standards. It is your right as a parent in Crestkill school districts. In fact, when we look back at the history of sex education in New Jersey, it's a right that's existed since the 1980s. That is not changing. If there's ever anything that you're uncomfortable with in the health standards, we can certainly adapt your child's exposure and make sure that you're part of that decision-making process. I also wanted to highlight some changes that have come out in 2018-19, just as an overview. There's been a lot of focus more on sexting, consent, and safe haven included inside of the health standards to make sure that kids have a more contemporary view. Without further delay, I wanted to go into the 4 reasons for the new updated standards, and finally turn you over to Mr. Roth to review the grade level expectations. When New Jersey came together, they really wanted to include 4 items: inclusivity, making sure that the health standards were inclusive of all New Jersey residents, medically accurate, make sure that there's a focus on safety, and finally create open dialogue where kids have safe adults that they can ask questions of. In addition to the parents, but that is a piece of making sure that we have a partnership of support for the kids. Without further delay, here's Mr. Roth.
Greetings, 7th grade families. I'd like to talk with you today about the units that have been created for students in 7th grade health. This is a class called Project Alert 7. There are 3 units that will comprise students' experience in their 7th grade health class. The first of which is a unit on peer pressure, and who, thinking back to your 7th grade experience, middle school experience, hasn't felt the influence of peer pressure on their lives in varying ways. Again, students picking up on their prior experience in health education within the district will be analyzing the relationships between healthy behaviors and their own individual personal health. They'll be identifying factors that can affect the ability to give or perceive consent to sexual activity. So that is something that becomes very important as our children age and grow. So for example, considering the impact of things like their self-esteem and their feelings of confidence and worth about themselves in relation to consent issues around sexual activity are things that will be discussed as far as factors that can affect or relate to that very important understanding that's very personal to each of our students. Identifying medically accurate sources of information about sexually transmitted infections and steps to obtain treatment resources, as well as demonstrating strategies to use social media safely. That gets back to a 5th grade unit on digital health in their elementary experience. Strategies to use it safely, to use social media legally and respectfully, and evaluate its impact on relationships. So things will be covered like sexting, things will be covered like the concept of images that we put out and post in place, and how these things tend to be impactful on our personal lives, especially if they're not done with the best of intentions to support our health and well-being. Just please know that this unit will have nothing to do with promoting sex in terms of advocating for students to take part in it or to participate in it. It is simply a unit that is designed to provide knowledge to students regarding their safety and to help them make safe choices when we as adults are not there or in their presence. Unit 2 is a unit in Project Alert 7 that has to do with social and emotional health. So this is examining cultural differences in how people cope with traumatic situations, crisis, and change. We saw that as well in a prior unit in their 6th grade experience. Students will also identify factors in this particular unit that are important in deciding whether and when to engage in sexual behaviors. Again, this is in no way promoting or helping kids to do so and advocating for them to engage in sexual behaviors. It's more considering factors that are important in deciding whether and when that happens. So things like deciding factors like your family's belief and attitudes toward that. Spirituality and religious affiliations with family that may relate to that. The concept of how peer pressure is a factor that relates to that. And how communication with family is the key ingredient relating to all that. So again, designing that understanding around those factors and basing it really into family communication is a core aspect. Identifying school and community members who are available to assist with emergencies. So for example, in cases of suicide prevention, sexual health, traumatic stress. Identifying also community members and services that are available for students to go to if they or someone they know is being sexually harassed or abused. So caregivers, guidance counselors, teachers. And again, we see the continued emphasis that the curriculum is placing on student safety. Unit 3 is a topic that is an unfortunate topic in terms of a unit focus, but it's one to educate kids on as they enter the age or the ages coming forward of dating and interacting on that level. So this is a unit on factors and issues pertaining to dating violence. One of the key things will be to describe and determine the effectiveness of laws that are designed to keep adolescents healthy and safe in this regard. So laws that pertain to consent and to drugs and to parental notification. There is a need in this unit to define sexual consent and sexual agency, and those are things that will just be supplied simply as definitions, with the understanding that communication is really the key. So in terms of sexual consent, it's just clarifying that that's a way to consider what's okay and what's not. And sexual agency has to do with communicating needs, and those can all be also things that are resulting in positive talks with parents and trusted adults, trusted family members, as things to clarify at home with children as well. Assessing the degree of risk and risk-reducing strategies in a variety of situations to reduce deliberate and non-deliberate injuries. When we think of dating and interacting that way as children grow is also a part of the course. So digital safety is something that will once again be touched on. Things like sexting, how that pertains to things like that can lead to things such as dating violence. Often non-deliberate actions are something that virtual or otherwise may not display poor intent by an individual, but still end up causing a person harm. So these are important ways of helping our students assess risk and ways to mitigate it, to reduce harm that comes to them or that they unintentionally can bring to others. And to certainly describing strategies that sex traffickers or those interested in exploiting young people in regard to sex employ to recruit youth.
So as we move into the 6th through 8th grade band, you're going to see a rapid maturation of your kids. They're basically getting ready for high school. They're going to be making decisions about dating and starting relationships. This is like a natural thing that they're going to fall into now that they're kind of moving beyond puberty into the high school years. So a few areas where it may be controversial really are not touched upon until 8th grade. We've backloaded it so that kids have the most information before the ninth grade and their high school years. So the first thing that we talk about in terms of controversial topics is really about pregnancy and all of the topics around pregnancy. Again, we're going to dive deeper into things with kids. We're not going to shelter them as much because they need to understand the ramifications that their decisions have on their bodies and their lives. So we do describe pregnancy testing, the signs of pregnancy, stages of pregnancy, prenatal health and pregnancy options. We also talk about options that people sometimes choose when they have pregnancies. So that involves parenting, abortion, or adoption as options. Again, no judgment is given. It's just informational for the kids to make decisions in their lifetimes. Predict challenges that may be faced by adolescent parents and their families. And then finally, identifying resources that exist for people who are pregnant and some of the prenatal care that goes along with it. What does this look like in the classroom? It's a scientific discussion on pregnancy. It's a discussion on a variety of options for families after one becomes pregnant. Students list challenges faced by all if adolescent becomes pregnant, like the impact it not only has on the adolescent, but also the family. And they examine resources people have to help with parenting: pediatricians, families, online resources, books, organizations. Also in eighth grade, we do go into more depth around differentiating between gender identity and gender expression, which is the new term, and sexual orientation. So gender identity is how you identify yourself. Gender expression is what types of clothes you wear. How do you present yourself to the world? And then sexual orientation is who you love. Those are the definitions that we would share with the kids. And finally, develop a plan for the school to promote dignity and respect for all people of all genders, gender identities, gender expressions, sexual orientations in the school community. They are in a diverse community, and they're going to continue to be in a diverse world. So it's important to promote the idea of everyone being supportive and caring towards others and having empathy. Kindness always and in all ways, right? So that's how we would promote it, is the idea of continuing to get along and the importance of at least respecting other human beings. What does this look like in the classroom? Discussions to differentiate between gender identity, expression, and sexual orientation. Discussions on ways to promote respect about varying differences. And it doesn't just have to be about gender or sexual orientation. It could be all topics. And examine safe places people can discuss their own identity, expression, or sexual orientation, including parents. I think that this is a good time in eighth grade to have those conversations if kids are struggling. They are figuring out who they are. So this is actually a good time to kind of give voice to that if necessary. The other area that can be somewhat controversial is the idea of consent and kind of the sexual health stuff. Now, this can be controversial, but I want you to understand that this is in a disease prevention mentality. So when we talk about some of these tougher contexts, it's important to talk about how their behaviors can lead to STIs or STDs, and also other things like unwanted pregnancies. So it really talks about the options that students have as they start to think about moving into high school and beyond. We identify and discuss factors that contribute to making healthy decisions about sex. We identify factors that are important in deciding whether and when to engage in sexual behaviors. We want them to cognitively think. None of us will be in the basements when this is occurring, or the bedrooms. So we want to front load them with the information they need to make the best healthy decisions for themselves, and identify factors that can affect the ability to give or perceive consent to sexual activity. This is something that's incredibly important because as kids are moving into high school, there are very real consequences if they do things without consent. And it's really important that our kids get this message clear. Define vaginal, oral, and anal sex in terms of disease transmission. That's how that's interpreted. So we talk about risk factors. We talk about, the ways that sometimes people engage in sex in terms of how does that transmit to disease. and identify short and long-term contraception and safer sex methods that are effective and describe how to access and use them. So abstinence, condom, all of these things are kind of laid out as ways for them to make better decisions in high school and beyond. And finally, develop a plan to eliminate or reduce risk of unintended pregnancies and STIs. So this is them reflecting on how they're going to protect themselves going forward, which is a great way of kind of giving them the protections necessary as they grow into adulthood. So although these are much more controversial topics, it's also very important that we arm them with the information to protect themselves. So that's really the idea behind this. Thank you very much. So as we look at the 6th through 8th grade units, you will have an option to opt your children out of any of the standards I just discussed. You do so by accessing a form that we're going to provide before next year. And you go in and you'll see a description of the unit, kind of the key topics. In this case, it's a 6th grade unit on nutrition and health. Then underneath, there are the actual standards. If you check a standard, that means we're going to realize that you may have an aversion to us teaching that to your child. So we will actually have your child leave the class or not go to that class and actually go independently read at those periods where we actually talk about these things. So that's the plan for opting out. It gives you the best ability as parents to kind of exercise your rights of kind of taking the lead in terms of sexual health with your children. And then finally, we do have an information night on February 15th at 6 p.m. in Merritt. If you'd like to, you can submit questions using this QR code or the link that I provided in my letter. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.